All right, Steve.
Okay.
All right, tell people why you're here and who you are for people who don't remember.
Okay. Yes, Steve. I've been on.
Great
I
sweatshirt.
think I've been 2 or 3. Thank you. I know. I bought this on Black Friday, and so I figured.
Oh, you did. You got it on sale. Smart.
On sale on Black Friday.
Savvy buyer.
I'm. It's. I had to wear it because it's my first time in the Barstool office, but also.
Did you get to walk around?
No, not really. But I took some snaps. I saw the little newspaper stand.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I love it. I've seen it on YouTube many times. So, The book Uncovered, I wrote last year, comes out now, February 21st. And it really is my look at the media. I've been in and around media for a dozen years or so. I'm the executive producer of the Megyn Kelly Show, and so that keeps me very much kind of in the media world. But I also previously worked at CNN and NBC and Fox, and for about 3 years I've been writing the Fourth Watch newsletter and podcast, and that also kind of keeps me around the media world.
And what I think is so interesting about you is you have such an interesting take on media. So like for people who are interested in media, explain, like I think you simultaneously love the media, but also debunk them and challenge them all simultaneously without a lot of ego. Actually, I feel like your peer set has a lot of ego. You don't come at it with a lot of ego.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think a couple factors here. I definitely, I worked at CNN until 2013, and it really, it was 10 years ago, but it feels like a completely different era of CNN. I will say they have a new management there now. I think things are on the upswing maybe at CNN.
Do?
I think that the thought process is. I don't think we've seen it necessarily in action, but I do think that the thought is there.
What's the vision?
I think the vision is getting back to news is the main one, and doing something that's more entertaining maybe is the wrong word, because I don't think they're going to start like literally doing entertainment, but making the product, it's stale, it's boring, and when it's not, it's this bomb throwing MSNBC competitor, and that's not sustainable either. So I do think that they're starting to clean that up. But yeah, to your point, I mean, I loved my time at CNN, and I love the media, and it like pains me to watch what it became, because I actually do think that I'm a big fan of independent media and the upstarts and Substack and podcasts, but I also think we need a strong, institutional media that can be a check on power, can have big resources and legal departments and things to do the big fights. And right now we've just the general person in America has lost such trust in the media, and it bothers me so much. And so yes, that's definitely the perspective I come from. It's not political either, because I'm not an overly political person. But I often find that the criticism comes from a media that has become just so obsessed with politics and allow themselves to make the mistakes that they didn't make before.
So the whole premise of the book is really just that media lost its following. Like media lost the people because they cozied up to politics. So why do you think traditional media did this? Like, what is it they were chasing in politics? Is it?
Yeah, I really see it. I lay out kind of 5 big problems in the book, and I do think it's complicated. That's part of the issue. It's not as easy to say, well, the media is full of left-wing crazies, because to be honest, when I worked at CNN, I would say most people were liberal when I was there too, but something fundamentally changed since then. And I laid a few of the problems. Geographic bias is one. You could walk around New York City and literally visit the newsrooms of all the most important media giants, and hit them all, and that's an issue. It's always sort of been this way, but it's gotten worse.
So it's homogenous, and it's East Coast liberal elite kind of thing, or
it's just a group think. I mean, and it's not even necessarily people who are all liberal, but they think a certain way and they don't get out of the bubble. I think COVID was bad for it also. It even more just put themselves on their little Zoom screens rather than getting out there. So that's one. But there's a few: coziness with power and lack of introspection. But I honestly think one of the biggest ones is just the business has changed, and I talk about this the decline in a clear, focused on what's the business incentives here. And when a business that for a very long time, you talk about media, you talk about like ESPN. I have a lot on ESPN in the book in chapter 9. These are things that didn't really have to feel like their business was shifting beneath their feet before, and now it really does. And I think when you have that, you start making bad decisions based on what the Twitter Bob is saying, for example, and that's not sustainable. And they don't have to do that either. I mean, look, social media is a huge factor here also. You know, the way that social media, the incentives of social media, the way that it can feel,
just the incendiary nature of social media.
And I mean, you get 20 positive comments or 20 negative comments, and you're going to feel a certain way. It's inevitable, and that leads to bad decisions too. So I think a lot of it is just these different structures that have happened here. Some of it's just purely the audience is just changing now, and they're flailing and panicking, and it leads to bad decisions that are, you know, harming the general trust that people have for them.
For sure. I think there's a couple issues, and we've talked about this over the years, which is one is, all right, so the distribution format is becoming irrelevant. Like, it's, you know, TV had it so good, whether you were Fox or CNN, like they had it so good.
Yeah.
You got a guaranteed revenue based on the number of cable subs, plus you had a really lucrative ad business, plus you were the only game in town.
Right.
Like you wanted to reach millions and millions of people. TV was it. Like print was okay, it was glossy, but it expired. You couldn't refresh it. The internet was like dirty and misunderstood. Yeah. And now it's like it's all been upended. So the business model of needing page views, I think, has really changed. I mean, we built our business chasing page views, but it's almost more expected in the internet because the internet is all opinion driven and it covers every corner on every topic on this planet.
Right.
But when television tried to do that, it made the ship so heavy and also so lopsided.
Yes. Because
they catered not only to, there was groupthink inside the newsroom, but then it just marketed to the same ideology all the time in a more, frankly, incendiary way almost. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. And I also think, you know, one of the things you're talking about with these institutions, you know, I have, like I said, a long section on ESPN. I talked to Bob Lee, legendary sports anchor, and he tells you all the interviews I do in the book are on the record. And so Bob puts his name to it, talks about stories he's never talked about before. But he describes a meeting. He was in the meeting when the Barstool show came up, and he talks about it in the book. And how it was a meeting with like 40 people in it, on air people, executives, and you know, someone spoke up and had a negative comment, and the executives kind of look around the room like shit, like we're gonna have to do something about this. And it's when you have, there's pros and cons to having that much buy-in, but certainly one of the downsides is when you have everyone have a seat at the table. You know,
when you're seeking consensus, you're like, shit, the only answer is no.
Right.
Is we can't do it. Like, you do end up doing nothing.
Yeah, and the reason that you have all those people in the room is because the business has changed, because you're kind of starting to feel like this quicksand beneath your feet. And yes, and then the social media, you know, loudest voices, the amplification.
Executives are vain.
Right. And so that leads to these kinds of decisions. He also talks about there was the crazy, you know, Rachel Nichols, Maria Taylor story during the NBA Finals, which the New York Times kind of published the story about, and it was sort of shadily sourced. And
just for people who, it's Rachel, somebody got somebody else's job, right? Maria got picked instead of Rachel.
Maria got Rachel Nichols' job on the NBA Finals. Okay. Rachel was complaining about that to a source. It was secretly tape recorded and then released about a year later by the New York Times. Rachel was then having suspended, essentially. Maria Taylor got the job, but then left for NBC. And Bob describes it as this drive-by assassination of Rachel Nichols. And
by the New York Times?
By the New York Times, but also, you know, I mean, he doesn't say it by ESPN, but, you know, they didn't have Rachel's back on it. You know, it was, once it got public, there was no...
Yeah, they just dropped her like a bad habit.
Yeah, because you get the backlash from social media. You get the loudest voices that don't necessarily have real power to hurt your brand, but these executives are not
mentioning you.
And they're panicking. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges right now, is because of the business model is not secure. That's when these decisions,
they're flailing, and then there's too many people involved in the decision making, and the people at the top don't really have vision. I also think they're obsessed with that one format, which is television. Like, I remember going to meet with like one of the highest people at CNN, and he didn't take his eyes off the television. Like, the television was there, and I'm sitting over here, and he just like talked to me like this, and I was like, this is insane. Like, that format isn't even relevant anymore. So, okay, so where can people find the book?
Yeah, the book is available wherever you get books, Amazon,
Okay.
Barnes & Noble. You can go to readuncover.com, find all the places to find it. It's got
Great.
an audiobook also, which has, you can hear from the 24 people in the media industry who speak in their voices.
Oh, they do it in their own voice. That's cool. That's a neat technique.
So,
that's cool.
Yeah. So you can find it there, readuncover.com.
And then how do people follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter,
Okay.
Steve Krakauer on Instagram, and also Fourth Watch is where I write on a weekly basis.
I love the Fourth Watch.
Thank you.
The Fourth
Appreciate
Watch
it.
is so interesting.
It's on Substack now.
Is it?
Yes.
Do you charge for it?
It's mostly free. I write the weekly newsletter. I write on kind of a variety of topics. It's free, and then I do some extra stuff for paying subscribers.
So great.